I think it's also important to reframe certain assumptions that we might have about thinking, that while the thoughts might disconnect us from the present, they also are indirectly a link to what is happening. But it's not the content that is important. It's what's driving the content. And whatever is driving the content is the most appropriate thing and is linked into your current present life. We just don't know how to translate that. The content is appealing. It's really appealing. Because it's like a movie. And the movie's about us. Because we identify with everything. We make everything about us. Because we also have been trained to comprehend content. It's been years of schooling, right? Analyzing content, distilling information or the meaning, the inherent meaning of the content from a very conceptual level. We default. Ever since we were put into school, we've been focusing on content. We have not been trained to attune to sensations or emotions. So sure, the content flies by and we're like, I gotta understand this. Because if I don't understand this, I'm gonna miss out on something important. But there's other channels of information. Very valuable channels of information that we're missing out on. And the problem with the content that's generated, it's always an interpretation. And any interpretation has bias, is subjective. And so while the content can give clues about what actually happened, there's a lot of gaps in between there. The content is just a guess. You know, the way I think about it is our brain is kind of like a computer and you give it a little bit of information, right? Here's this sound that comes in and here's the image, you know, and here's the emotion and here's like thoughts that are in the background, and it takes all of that and it just rearranges it in a configuration. No, not that. Rearranges in another configuration. No, not that. Well, let's try to match this with what happened in the past, those configurations. Oh, it kind of looks like that. Let's check another place. All of this is happening very quickly. And the configuration that has the most probability based on previous experiences, like, okay, there's like an 80% probability that this is it. Let's spit this out into consciousness. Boom, that's it. But all this other stuff, which is called happening in the hidden layer, right? If you have a background in machine learning or even in cognitive science, they call this all in the hidden layer, all these calculations and probabilities before it actually makes it into the consciousness. It's just probability. And yet we put absolute trust in what it spits out. And that's problematic. It's just a probable guess. So what other information is available? Well, we have our emotions, and the emotions are responding directly, are connected into that hidden layer. And then you have the sensory, which is actually directly in experience. It's not the totality of experience. Right now I'm looking at the screen. I'm not seeing what's around the screen. So even that, it's selected experience. And so everything that the mind generates is a construct. None of it is actually embedded in what's true. Absolute true. And a big reframe, which offers a lot of freedom, is to not give so much emphasis on what the mind is producing. to get curious about the other channels of information and to not be attached to any interpretation. Because it's a good chance that it's not necessarily congruent with what's actually true. So the freedom that comes from this practice is, once again, understanding on an experiential level that everything that is produced in our consciousness is a construct. It's a virtual reality. So if it's a virtual reality, I'm not going to sweat it because it's just it's just a random story or movie that I'm in. It's fiction. And when I know it's fiction, then I also stop defending the story or trying to convince somebody else about the story because I know it's fiction. And everybody else is producing their own fiction and offering it to us. If I know it's fiction that they're offering to me, I take it in, but I don't necessarily attach too much meaning to it because it's fiction. I just observe. I just watch. What I can start to connect with is I can start to connect on the somatic emotional field. And you've all experienced this when somebody's talking about something on and on and on, but you sense that it's something else. There is an aspect of you that knows it's something else. And it's not based on their words. It's based on something else. Maybe it's their tone, maybe it's their facial expression, their posture. All of those things combined give information and you just know. And that feeling of knowing is very different than understanding. You know, when you just know something is off, you're not quite sure what it is from a conscious intellectual level, but something doesn't feel right. That's what we're trying to engage with.